All right, Wednesday afternoon, and I just wanted to send a quick note as I am looking at some of your stuff that you turned in this past week. So, primarily your research project number 3. I've started grading those. I'm not going to get to all of them today, but I hope to get to them all by the end of this week. So, thank you for those. And as usual, I'm putting as much feedback as I can, both on your paper and in the grading rubric sections. But as I have started to go through them, just a few things that I wanted to re-emphasize or re-explain so that hopefully maybe my comments make more sense when you read them in your own paper. So one of the questions that I ask you to describe in the data section is explain your variables to me one more time. Explain what your dependent variable is and how you're going to measure it, and what your independent variable is and the different levels of it. So I saw some mix-ups still on the difference between independent variables and dependent variables. And so dependent variables, again, are that's the thing that you're measuring at the end. So it's the outcome. So if I say that I'm measuring sportsmanship among intramural participants, then sportsmanship is my dependent variable. It's the thing I'm measuring at the end. And a common mistake that I saw was listing the type of person that you're measuring that dependent variable from. So for example, if I'm measuring sportsmanship of intramural athletes, then my dependent variable is still sportsmanship, not intramural athletes. So I saw that mistake quite a bit. So your dependent variable isn't who you're measuring, it's what you're measuring at the end. And my example is maybe a sportsmanship survey among intramural participants. That's my dependent variable, is sportsmanship. So the instrument. Let's talk about about how you were describing your instrument. Some of you used a pre-established instrument, and that's great. That's easy, and you kind of told me about how that instrument is valid and how many questions it has and how it's scored, and that's great. And if you're making up your own instrument, then I still want to know some details like, how did you arrive at your questions? Why did you choose the questions that you chose for your instrument? How do your questions, the questions that you composed, how do you know that they're actually measuring the thing that you say you're measuring? So for example, let's say I'm making up an instrument to measure intelligence level. But then I decided that the way I'm going to do that is to measure your ability to do calculus. Well, is that really a measure of intelligence? Maybe not. That's just a measure of your ability to do calculus, and it doesn't have anything to do with your intelligence. So how do I know that one equals the other? So that's what we refer to as validity. How do you know that your instrument is measuring what you think it's measuring? So, the best example I could think of was, I think I'm measuring intelligence, but my instrument only measures calculus. Those two things aren't quite the same thing, so that's not very valid. That's not a valid measure of intelligence. And so I wanted to know how you're planning on addressing that with your own instrument. How do you know that it's measuring what you say it's going to measure? That's a challenge with developing our instrumentation, so that's an important thing to think about if you're going to do, like a thesis or something where you're going to have an instrument. So data analysis, that was another section that I asked you to look at in the methods section. And this is, in this part of assignment, I wanted you to detail how you're measuring that dependent variable. So let's go back to our sportsmanship example. We're going to measure sportsmanship as our dependent variable. So are you using a survey to measure sportsmanship? If so, what will be the way that the answers look when people complete the survey? Is there a scale with numbers on it, like a scale from 1 to 5 for all of your questions? Do participants pick a number between 1 to 5, and that's kind of the scale they use? If so, then you have qualitative data in the form of numbers that you can analyze, greater than or less than or equal to. You can do an analysis that way. Or are participants answering interview questions in their own words? Are you asking them to describe their feelings in your instrument? And if that's the case, then you have qualitative data that you're going to analyze. So when your data collection is done, what do you have? Do you have numbers? Do you have words? What does that data look like? So what format is your data in? And I wanted to know that in your data analysis section. So if I didn't see that clearly, then it told me that you didn't know what your instrument was going to give you, what was going to be the output when participants finished your instrument. What did the output look like? Was it in numbers? Was it in words? What were the questions how are they going to answer the questions? So that was what I wanted in the instrument and in the data analysis section. So just kind of a closing note, the methods section of a research project tells you, kind of spells out exactly how you got the answers to your questions. So it should be in enough detail that someone else could come along and replicate your study exactly the way that you did it. So they would ask the same questions of the same participants over the same amount of time. And so when I'm looking at that section, it needs to be in the kind of detail that I could come along and reproduce that study exactly the same way that you did it. So in that level of detail, you're telling me exactly what you did or what you're going to do. So to the extent that I could come along and come along later and do the exact same study. So that's one of the main points with the method section. So again, also another place where easy points came off is if I didn't see that APA format detailed. And so I saw a few of those too. So when you're reading instructions and when you're reading the grading rubric, before you do your assignment, please take note of what I'm asking for with APA formatting. This is pretty standard in graduate level classes that we use this type of formatting. That's just the writing style that exists in graduate school. So the more automatic we make it in the classes now, the easier it will be when it's actually time to do your thesis, so that you don't have to go back spending time to relearn how to write APA and fix kind of some of those details. So that's another place where some points might have come off as you go through your rubric and you look kind of as what went on in that section. So anyway, as I was grading those, I just wanted to kind of verbalize some feedback so that hopefully you can put my comments in context when you read over your papers. So I appreciate you listening, and have a great rest of your week.